I fought beside humans once. What I witnessed changed the galaxy forever. Pour yourself something strong before I start this one, because I am not repeating it twice. My name is Dravkesh, and I have served the Vextheri combined fleet for 31 cycles. I have fought void pirates, rogue AI swarms, and one extremely aggressive trade dispute that somehow ended in a boarding action. None of that prepared me for the day I was assigned to fight alongside humans. You laugh. Everyone laughs when I say that, like I am about to tell a joke. I am not. I wish I were. Sit down, listen, and maybe by the end you will understand why I do not laugh anymore when someone mentions Earth. It started with a briefing, which should have been my first warning. Briefings are sacred. You stand at attention, you listen to the strategic officer, you do not speak unless spoken to. My fleet was assigned Emergency Joint Command with the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Battalion, under a human commander named Talia Reyes. I remember thinking, fine, humans, whatever, they are new to the galactic stage, they will be nervous, deferential, maybe even grateful for our experience. I have made better predictions blindfolded. Reyes walked into that command briefing eating what I later learned was called a protein bar, chewing through half of it before she even reached the podium. She looked at the tactical display, looked at my fleet's readiness reports, looked at her own battalion's reports, and said, and I am translating this as accurately as my universal translator allows, well, this is going to be fun. Fun. We were outnumbered 11-1 by an incoming KRYN Ascendancy armada bearing down on a shared colony world, and this woman called it fun. I remember turning to my second officer and asking if human translators were simply defective. He did not know either. Nobody warned us. There should be a warning. The KRYN Ascendancy does not negotiate. They do not accept surrender. They arrive, they burn, they leave nothing behind but debris and silence. I have seen entire outposts erased by them, and every species in the quadrant knows to run when their fleet signature appears on long-range scanners. So when Reyes' battalion started arriving at the staging point, casually chatting over open comms about something called fantasy football, I assumed they simply did not understand the danger they were in. I was wrong. They understood perfectly. They just process fear differently than any species I have ever encountered, which is to say they appear to weaponize it against itself. Here is something nobody tells you about humans until you have fought beside them: they name things. Everything. Their missiles had names. Their ships had names. I watched a human weapons officer paint the words, "Regret nothing," on the side of a torpedo before loading it, like he was signing a birthday card and not preparing to end several thousand lives. Someone else was running a betting pool on how many enemy ships would go down before we lost our first cruiser. I asked Reyes if this was standard human military discipline. She told me, and I quote, "If we stop joking, we start thinking, and thinking too hard right before a suicide mission is bad for morale, big guy." Suicide mission. She said that with the same tone most people use to order food. I have fought soldiers from 40 different worlds in my career. I have seen bravery, I have seen discipline, I have seen fear masked by ritual and prayer and stoic silence. I had never once seen anyone cope with certain death by mocking death directly to its face, like it owed them money and was late on the payment. The KRYN Armada arrived exactly on schedule, because the KRYN Ascendancy is nothing if not punctual about genocide. Their formation blotted out the starfield, wave after wave of black angular warships stacked in perfect predatory silence. My fleet held position. The human battalion held position beside us, and over the comms I heard someone humming a tune I did not recognize, low and steady, like he was waiting for a bus and not the apocalypse. The battle began the way these things always begin, badly and immediately. The KRYN opened with a saturation bombardment that took out 2 of my cruisers in the first 90 seconds. I watched good soldiers I had served with for a decade, vanish from the tactical display like someone had simply deleted them. My own ship took a glancing hit that knocked out our secondary shields and threw half my bridge crew against the bulkheads. I remember thinking, with the particular clarity that comes right before you assume you are going to die, that this was it, this was how the story ended, erased alongside a battalion of overconfident primates who thought war was a punchline. Then Reyes did something that should not have worked. Something that, by every principle of tactical doctrine I have ever studied, should have gotten every human in that battalion killed instantly. She ordered her damaged frontline ships, the ones already crippled and losing power, to stop retreating and instead push forward into the thickest part of the KRYN formation. Not to fight. To ram. Dead ships, drifting on momentum and spite, aimed straight into enemy hulls at maximum closing speed. I heard her give the order over open comms, calm as anything, "All right, dead weight, let's make ourselves useful." And they did it. Without hesitation. Ships that had no working weapons, no shields, barely any life support, turned themselves into battering rams and tore gaping holes through KRYN capital ships that my entire fleet's coordinated fire had failed to dent. I watched, frozen, as human pilots who knew they had maybe 40 seconds of life left used every one of those seconds flying directly at the enemy instead of away from them. That is when my ship lost main power entirely, and things stopped being something I watched from a safe distance. We drifted, dark and vulnerable, directly into the path of a KRYN boarding craft. They breached our hull in 3 places within minutes. I grabbed a sidearm I had not fired in actual combat in 6 cycles and prepared to die defending a bridge with a skeleton crew and no functioning weapon systems. This is, I want to be clear, the part of the story where I stopped finding humans funny and started finding them terrifying, though not for the reasons you might expect. A human boarding team, 4 soldiers from Reyes Battalion, cut through the same section of hull the KRYN were breaching, because apparently someone on that ship had been keeping track of every Allied vessel in trouble and decided ours was worth saving. They fought through KRYN borders in corridors barely wide enough for 2 bodies, using improvised melee weapons because their rifles had jammed in the chaos. I fought beside them, badly, my hands shaking, my translator struggling to keep up with the sheer volume of things they were shouting at each other that I am fairly certain were not tactical in nature. One of them, a young soldier who could not have been more than 20 cycles old by human reckoning, a man named Corporal Danny Osei, put himself between me and a KRYN blade meant for my throat. I do not know why. I was not his commanding officer. I was not even his ally by any bond deeper than a hastily signed treaty. He did not know me. He had spoken to me exactly once, to ask if Vextheri drink coffee, and I had said no, and he had called that a tragedy. He died holding that blade back with his own arm rather than let it reach me. I still do not understand why. I have asked other humans since then, and the closest answer I ever received was, "That's just what you do." Just what you do. As if instinctive self-sacrifice for a near stranger is a normal Tuesday activity and not the single most confusing thing I have witnessed in 3 decades of service. We won. I want to say that plainly because it still does not feel real when I say it. An outnumbered, outgunned, half-suicidal joint fleet held the line against the KRYN ascendancy and broke their armada badly enough that the survivors retreated, which the KRYN have done perhaps 4 times in their entire recorded history. We won, and we lost nearly half of Reyes Battalion doing it, including Corporal Osei, including dozens of names I never learned and now never will. Here is the part that truly broke something in my understanding of the universe. Within 1 hour, 1 single hour, after the wreckage had barely stopped drifting, I heard laughter on the recovery deck. Human soldiers, some of them freshly bandaged, some of them still covered in the blood of friends who did not make it, were already trading jokes about the battle. Someone was recounting how badly Osei's ramming maneuver had scared him, doing an exaggerated impression of the man's voice over comms, and others were laughing, actually laughing, tears on some of their faces, laughing anyway. I asked Reyes how they could do that. She looked at me like I had asked why the sun was warm. Because if we don't laugh about it now, we carry it forever, and we've got more fighting to do. She said it quietly, none of the sarcasm from before, and for the first time I understood that the jokes were never about not caring. They were the opposite. They cared so much it would crush them if they did not find somewhere to put it. I filed my official report on that engagement 3 days later, and I will tell you honestly, I did not know how to write it in a way the Vextheri High Command would believe. How do you explain, in a formal military document, that the deciding factor in an impossible victory was a species that copes with mortal terror by insulting it directly? How do you explain that they win not despite their disregard for their own survival, but because of it? That report went further than I expected. It got passed to the Joint Species Council. Other fleet commanders who had served alongside human units started filing similar accounts, and within 2 cycles, something had shifted across known space. Species that had previously viewed the Terran expeditionary forces as a curious, undisciplined footnote in galactic military affairs started rewriting their threat assessments entirely. Council bureaucrats who had spent decades ranking fleet strength by tonnage and firepower suddenly had to account for a variable none of their models included, which is that humans apparently fight harder the worse their odds become, and enjoy it less than they let on. There is a phrase now, spreading through military academies from here to the outer reach, and I did not coin it, though I wish I had. When a unit fights past the point where retreat or surrender would be the rational choice, when they hold ground they have no logical reason to hold, soldiers now say that unit is fighting like a human. It is meant as a warning, not a compliment, though I suppose it works as both. So that is my story. That is what I saw. I fought beside humans once, and it cost good people their lives, and it changed how an entire galaxy calculates risk, and it left me sitting in bars like this one trying to explain something that should not make sense and somehow does anyway. You are still smiling at me like this was an amusing tale about strange allies with a strange sense of humor. It was not. Next time you meet a human mid-crisis, and they crack a joke while the walls are coming down around both of you, do not assume they have lost their nerve. That is not a coping mechanism. That is a warning label, and by the time you finish laughing along with them, you may already be standing next to the last thing you will ever see hold the line. Now finish your drink. I am not telling this one again.